Do you have several photos from a place you visited or from some memory that you might want to put together in a sketch like a collage? We visited Winslow, Arizona a few years ago, and I had several photos of sites that a hotel that we stayed at, sites that we visited, the famous corner, standing on the corner where there's the bronze statue of Glenn Frey, who wrote the famous Eagle song, and several other attractions in the town. So, and they were pretty interesting photos, and I wanted to somehow put them together. And so yesterday, it took me a long time. I worked all day on this sketch, and all of the things that you see on these 2 pages were from separate photos. The photo of the statue, the butterfly was part of a mural on a wall. The hotel that we stayed at, La Posada, it's a famous hotel. And then there was a little park nearby that had one of the Santa Fe Railroad cars, because Winslow was it still is a big railroad town. And there were some cute cars from the 1960s, and I captured one of those, an old Volkswagen, and a really nice totem pole, and I don't remember the name of the artist, but I'm going to mention that at the end of my video. And then, of course, the famous US Route 66 sign. Those appear all over Route 66 in Arizona. And so I had all of these photos of different objects, and how do you put them together? Well, it took me quite a while to fit everything in and to get them in some kind of order. I started out with the statue of the bronze statue, and then I kind of went from there. I wanted the name of the town, which is written this way or painted this way on the side of a building on that corner. It's right on Route 66 where the statue is. And so I started with that and got that done. And then I just kind of played around in pencil with the placement of these different objects. So it took quite a while, and I ended up moving things around. This US 66 sign I originally had somewhere over here, but it was too close to this other sign that looks just like it, so the shape. So I didn't like that, so I moved it over here and then added the American flag, which was hanging on so many storefronts in the town. So there you have it, and in this video I'm going to go ahead and paint it, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it first and explain that, and then I'm going to have to speed the video up because this will take a while to paint, but I will go back and narrate it to talk about what I'm doing. Anyhow, I hope you like this, and I hope it's helpful, and thanks for watching. So I've sped this up 8 times because the video was so long, but I wanted you to be able to see the steps involved in painting it. And I started over on the right-hand side of the book because I'm left-handed, and that's just to keep my hand out of the wet paint. Creating a dark and a light side to that totem pole, getting the bushes in, and when you see me lay that color in so fast, I've wet the surface first, and that's why that color blends so well. That little Volkswagen, I drew some clouds on it. It had some clouds on it in the picture, and then it was really rusty, and there were no headlights, just black holes where the headlights were. So I really tried to recreate that look, and it actually turned out better than I expected. And it wasn't all that hard to draw, really. But it's a cute little car, and it had the name Winslow on it, which is why I selected that particular car to put in the sketch. There were some other cars too, but I really like this one. There's the black headlights. And I will put a shadow under that car because it's just kind of sitting there floating. So I put a little shadow in, kind of make it sit down in the picture. And onto the pole for the railroad crossing sign. And there were some beautiful lavender bushes in front of around the sign and around that rail car. So I wanted to get some of that color in too. The rail car is a nice bright red, so it really stands out. It's a Santa Fe car, which is, there's the Santa Fe logo. And I'll get the lettering in on that later. Moving on to the hotel, the most distinctive thing that I remember about the front of that hotel is all the sunflowers lining the walkway when you walk in, so I wanted to capture that. And you can see, even though this is really sped up, I did put it in fairly quickly anyway, not being that careful with the flowers, but you'll see how I fix those up and reshape them a little bit later in the video. In the front of the hotel, it was, Spanish style architecture. And for the inside, inside the doors, inside the building, I wanted to show that there was a little bit of light with some darkness, which is why I combined the gray color and the yellow color in there. And now I gave the sunflowers a little time to dry, and then I went back and used my liner pen to go back and outline some of the flowers, getting the butterfly in, and then the bronze statue of the guitar player. That actually is not a statue of Glenn Frey. His is over on another side of the sidewalk, and I didn't draw that one. But this is just a random musician, and the reason I know that is that I ran into the sculptor of that statue while I was there. His name is Rob Adamson, and he just happened to be there that day, and so he told me about that. And the Winslow sign on the side of the building, I really wanted to capture that color that was on the side of the building, so that was the reason for that reddish brown color. And then there was a sign near the bronze statue that said Glenn Frey Drive, which is that little green area that you see. I haven't put the lettering in yet. Back to the Santa Fe car, finishing that. And you can see that I move around a bit, and that's just to give my paint time to dry. So I'll work on one section. If it's still dry, I'll move on and work on something else. And the totem pole, although it took me a long time to draw it, was not that hard to paint. I thought it would be, but it really wasn't. And it's just a matter of applying the values, looking at the image as my reference. So it really wasn't that difficult. I was happy with the way it turned out. And I tried to balance out the color. I've got some of that color over on the left side. Everything in this image, or in this sketch, I've tried to balance out. So having harmonious colors, but moving colors around so that they're not all located, so similar colors aren't all located in one space, but they're still harmonious to look at. And there I'm just going back in, reinforcing some of the darks around those sunflowers, which helps to make them stand out more. And I'm going to have another part to this video where I slow it down. That'll be after I finish this. And I'll talk a little bit about finishing touches. And I think that getting that flag in there was my last step of this sped up video. And then the rest of the things I'll slow down and talk more about. The butterfly was fun to do, and getting the black lines in will be fun to do too. So there's still quite a bit left, and that's what I'm going to do next here. Now I've slowed it down a little bit, even though it may not look like it. And I'm going to use my Posca pens for several of the finishing touches. Posca pens, if you don't know, are acrylic ink. And you can get them at any arts and crafts store or art supply store. And they're nice because they're very vibrant and opaque since it's acrylic paint. Now, here I'm lettering the word Santa Fe on that rail car, and I can't use the Posca pens there because they're too large. The tips are too large. So then I pulled out one of my other pens, a Zig pen. That's made by Kuretake. And Zig pens are great. They have a thin and a thick end, two ends, and I was just testing there on a scrap sheet. I decided to use the thinner tip because that was such a small space for the word Santa Fe. And that is water-based ink, so you cannot go back over it with any wet brush after you put that on. So that should be one of your last steps if you're going to do that. Then up in the words Winslow, Arizona, I needed to clean that up a bit because I didn't keep all of the white areas white. And I'm using a Posca pen because you can see how bright that is. But unfortunately, I couldn't find my thinner tip. That's a broad tip on it. So I went outside the lines a little bit, and I'm going to go back and fix that with my permanent pen at the end. Just my regular sketching pen. There I'm doing the Glen Fry Drive sign, and I don't think I have enough contrast in that sign. I may go back later and darken up that green. Even though it was a light green, you can barely see the writing. I'm doing that with my Signo. It's a Uniball Signo broad tip pen. And that's a pretty good pen too. It's pretty opaque, but not as good as the Posca pens. But the Posca pens were too big to use it there. So the Signo pen was a good choice, I think. There I'm cleaning up some of my lettering with that Signo pen too, because I can get in there with a smaller tip. But I'll still clean up the edges with a regular fine liner pen. That's what I'm doing there. I think that's probably an O2. I've mentioned this before in some of my videos, but when you take your pen, your permanent ink pen, and you're going over something that has watercolor on it, for whatever reason, the pens, it looks wider when you lay it down, so I use a thinner pen. Normally I'll use an O5 to sketch, but that's probably an O2. It's just a thinner nib. And here I'm using a Posca pen to write the words La Posada Hotel on the front of the hotel. And I was just lucky that I had a blue Posca pen that almost perfectly matched the color that I had already painted on the doors. That was just a happy accident. Then I I wanted to, my brown Posca pen dried up, so I couldn't use that. So I went back to my Zig pens and pulled out a bronze pen to just darken the centers of those sunflowers and just to make them stand out more. And look what a difference that makes. So contrast makes a big difference in a painting. And always look at your painting and make sure that it has enough contrast. That's the biggest thing I see with new painters is they don't have enough contrast in their paintings. And that's what makes things really stand out. There I was just fixing that sunflower. I had messed up the ink on that, the black ink, and it was so close to the statue that I wanted to fix it. And, so I went back and fiddled with that a little bit. There I'm just going back in with some dark green watercolor to, again, define those sunflowers a little bit more and get more contrast in them. It just makes the flowers pop out more. And that's a trick when you're painting any kind of flowers. Be sure to get a lot of dark right up next to the edges of the flower to make it stand out. Then back to my Signo broad pen for the stars on the U.S. flag. And I wasn't careful here about counting the rows or the stars. I was just suggesting the stars on the flag. And I may go back with another type of pen if I can find my my white Posca pen that has a fine tip point. I'll use that to reinforce those stars. Then I decided to use my black Posca pen to finish off this butterfly. I would normally use ink for that. I would use black carbon ink. But since I had this out and it's handy, I used it. And I like how it came out. I just used it on all of the lines, the black lines that you see on the butterfly. And I think it made it really stand out well. And then back to the white Posca pen for all the little dots on the butterfly. And this, I think, is my final touch with the Posca pens. I pulled out my yellow one to make the center divider in the road. And in real life, that would have been a white line, but it's my world, so I made it yellow. It's more colorful. And just, putting on some finishing touches. I had an orange Posca pen. I reinforced the name Winslow on the side of the Volkswagen. And that's pretty much it. There you have it. It was a fun little sketch to do, even though it took me a long time to do. So I encourage you to try something like this. It's lots of fun. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up, and thanks for watching.